So Joe's background and process, and Craig is direct experience. Craig Stevens is the proud son of Margaret Louise Peggy Coyer Stevens, a fourth-generation Oswegonian, famous for lake effect storms, and Lloyd Arthur Steve Stevens, a fifth-generation son of Montrose, Pennsylvania, and the beautiful Endless Mountains. And if you've never been to Montrose, it reminded me a lot of a central New York town, Skaneateles or Seneca Falls. It's gorgeous down there. Craig was born and raised in California and grew up at the beach, becoming a champion swimmer and water polo player. He moved to Virginia when his father became ill in 2006, and after he died, bought his sixth-generation home in Silver Lake Township near Montrose. Craig began his study of the oil and gas industry when he found out a 10-year lease had been forced on his property without his permission. He also had the 33-mile pipeline from New York to Pennsylvania planned to go across his property, along with the ensuing local seismic testing. He became aware of the problems in Dimock, Pennsylvania, about 15 miles away, and while looking into it, he found that almost all of his local community had turned their back on the people in Dimock. Craig has spent the last 2 years submitting right-to-know requests to Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection for information that should have been freely provided to a tax-paying citizen in Pennsylvania. These right-to-know requests have provided a chilling story of avoidance and ignorance from our regulatory and elected officials regarding contamination of the Commonwealth. Craig is here today to discuss what he has observed and personally experienced since the oil and gas industry has come to our community, and he's here to separate the facts from fiction for you. Here's Craig. There you go. And thank you for being here, Craig. He travels all over the place. We're lucky to have him. And after Craig's done, we're going to do questions and answers. So there'll be plenty of time for that.
Evening, everybody. I live in Silver Lake Township. I'm sixth generation owner of my property. My children are the seventh. That's my dad's side. As she said, my mom's from Oswego, so I have a little bit of interest in what's happening here in New York. First off, I want to, there might be some people in the audience that question how I got my property, but I will answer that to anybody here. Here's the deed and how I inherited it from my dad. He was gifted it along with his brother and sister in 1994 by my grandmother, and so he had a long-term hold on the property before I ever inherited it from him. Joe covered a lot of things on the legal aspect. He's an attorney. I'm not. I have a high school diploma and a couple years of junior college with no degree. So I'm a marketing and PR person. When I moved to my family property after my dad died and my grandmother also died in January of 2010, I went down to make sure they had transferred the name on the deed. Excuse me one second, set the clock there. And what I found was they did transfer my brother and sister and I's name to our ancestral home. The family property, which is 115 acres, is up the road. That is still in the name of my brother and sister and I. That's my dad's third, and my aunt and uncle. So that's a shared property. What I also found was a gas lease on the property. It was done after my dad died, so I was actually a property owner along with my brother and sister at the time that was done. That was mentioned in my bio, but I also found a transfer of that was done in 2007. I didn't find it until 2010, was never notified. Found a transfer to Statoil of 1/3 of the mineral rights interest from Chesapeake Energy to Statoil. So not only find out there was a lease I didn't know about, but they had transferred 1/3 of the rights to Statoil, which is not the Norwegian company, it's the country of Norway. So what Joe up there is telling you is correct. There's a lot of foreign interest in this. I have something here I can show you later, but that shows foreign flurry. India, Japan, China, Russia, Norway, they're all very interested in what's going on here with our oil and our natural gas. So I also went up on my property when I got here and found stakes across it for the pipeline that I had no idea was being planned for our property either. My neighbor told me, oh yeah, they staked that out a while ago, and they staked it out 33 miles across from Windsor, New York, down to Friendsville, Pennsylvania. That was the Laser Midstream Pipeline. The gas lease, and we're not dealing with the gas drilling tonight, we're dealing with pipelines, but the gas lease, I was able to contact somebody, but one thing they didn't do with the pipeline easement was force it on my property. They actually were waiting for my brother and sister and I to converse with them before they recorded on our deed. And so that was good news with the pipeline. At least they had to talk to us. One thing I didn't like, immediately, the talk of eminent domain. So I don't know about you, but I'm a conservative, actually. My dad called that the rule book. That's the Constitution. My brother and sister and I were required to carry it as soon as we could read it. And I judge everything based on what's in there. That means the government's supposed to leave me to decide what's right for my property or not. But I also have an obligation not to affect the neighbor's property. That's in there too. You can't affect somebody else's rights with my own. So when I looked at an illegal lease on my property that was signed, they signed my 95-and-a-half-year-old grandmother in a nursing home to it, who was, by the way, the life tenant only. She didn't own a blade of grass. She had retained the right to live there. And she did not live there since 2005. And this was done in 2007. So she, for the remainder of her life from 2005 to 2010, she never returned and lived at the house. So that was kind of curious to me. The pipeline was a little interesting. And when I moved there, didn't have an opinion on this. I was actually pretty happy about the gas coming to the area, because being a person from California, it looked pretty enticing to be able to make some money from my minerals. So I had no real problem with it, but I had a problem with the way they had gone about attaining my land. So most of my coverage tonight is going to be about, if you're a landowner here or planning on buying land, it's about how you're treated as a landowner. I always thought growing up that if you have property, that you pay your taxes, and then you get to do with what you want or not what you want. But I found out that's not how the energy issue is. It's pretty demanding on what they want to do with your property and what you can or can't do about it. My introduction to the pipeline issue was going down to the laser office in Montrose, Pennsylvania. I went down to discuss with them what their plans were for the property and how come they didn't include some of the landowners originally. And I met 4 nice guys from Louisiana. They said y'all, so I'd imagine they weren't from Montrose, Pennsylvania. Big guys. I mean, these were big guys, real nice, real amiable people. And I started talking to them, and they said, we're really glad you're here. We need to get your brother and sisters and your permission so we can put this pipeline in on your property and get the gas to market so everyone can make some money. And I said, fantastic. I'm a businessman. Let's talk about what we're looking at. And I said, what kind of offer are we looking at? And they said, we're offering $5 a foot and a lifetime easement. I literally went like this. I went, is there a camera in here? Am I supposed to be laughing right now? And they said, no, that's what we signed all your neighbors up for. I said, well, sorry, boys, I'm not my neighbors. You're dealing with me now. And I'm not from here, from these parts. So I don't roll over quite as easy as maybe some of the people you were talking to earlier. Then they said something that kind of upset me. They said, well, almost all of your neighbors have signed. You're one of the only holdouts. Now, that's a classic example. That happens on the gas side too, but we're covering pipeline. So I said, that's interesting. I called all my neighbors last night, and 5 miles to the west of me, here's their names and phone numbers, said they haven't done any agreements with you. I don't know about you guys, but I'm certainly not interested in dealing with liars, because that's called a liar. When you tell somebody you did something, or you're the only person left, or one of them, and then I call on everybody for 5 miles, that's a lot of owners for 5 miles. Had not done any kind of agreement. So I said, I really don't like to do business with people who don't tell me the truth. That's not a good business relationship. And then they all crossed their hands at the same time. And I told them, $5 a foot, yeah, sharpen the pencil, and you're never going to get a lifetime easement as long as I have a pulse. And they, after I challenged them on the lying, they crossed their arms at the same time. They're standing across the room, across the table from me, and they said, the state of Pennsylvania wants us here, and they're going to give us a certificate of public convenience. I said, do you mean eminent domain? We prefer to call it certificate of public convenience. I said, guys, I'm just met you, so I really don't want to get upset here, but I will recap our conversation. You want to give me nothing per foot, my family, for this property, $5 a foot. I said, that's a joke. You lied to me about my neighbors, and you want a lifetime easement. And I said, and then you're telling me you want to take it by the point of gun from the state government. I said, I don't know how they do things in Louisiana, boys, but around here, those are fighting words. You don't come to my community and tell me how you're going to take my property. What ended up happening was they had to file with the Public Utility Commission. So we got hearings, just like FERC will do with this. Only FERC is a little much bigger. That's the 800-pound gorilla. These guys were like the small rhesus monkey. So we went to these hearings and talked at the Public Utility Commission. And they let us speak. And I solved the problem right there. I had the CEO, both the CEOs of the two companies, Laser and the other gentleman, Chip Berthelot, sitting right in front of us. And when I got to the microphone, I simply looked at them and said, I understand you want my property, and I understand you want to take it without my permission and pay me next to nothing and keep it forever. They're like, And I said, first of all, I'm reading the Constitution, and they always hate when you pull out the rule book. And I said, I believe it's the Fifth Amendment that says taking of property requires that you have public good and you're justly compensated for it. So I just covered the public good part. I said, I've got this part of my big property where they cut power lines through, and they hooked a magic wire to my house and all my neighbors, and when I flip a light switch on, the lights come on, and I pay a regulated rate. So are you going to connect all of us to this pipeline and let us have natural gas? Because I'd sure like to get off heating oil. It's pretty expensive. And they said, no. I said, well, I've got another magic wire at my house for when I pick up this thing and hold it to my ear, I hear a dial tone and I can dial out anywhere in the world and talk to people at a regulated rate. So they were allowed to take the property that way because we all get a public benefit from it. Same thing with a cable wire. It's the same thing. So what public good are you providing when you extract gas from a private property, put it through a privately owned pipeline, send it to Massachusetts to be liquefied by a privately owned company, and then sell it to China or India or Russia or Norway? You show me one, just ask them, show me one public good from that. One. There's zero. Doesn't pass the rule book. So it's very simple if you follow the rule book. So Joe talked about some of the different legal aspects. My issue was, okay, so you want to put this in, and you want to give us nothing, and if we don't like it, you're going to steal it. Well, guess what Judge Caldwell found about 8 months after the hearings? That me and a few other people were exactly right. They found no public benefit. So back to square one for Laser. They had to actually come and negotiate with people. They had signed a lot of people up by threatening them that we're going to take the property anyway. You might as well sign and at least get the $5. A lot of the people. There's 153 people along the whole line for 33 miles, 153 property owners. About more than half or two-thirds fell for that one. Some didn't. They held out. And with my property, it's a shared property. You can't hold up your family member from developing their property. You just can't do it. So I didn't necessarily agree with what was happening, but what ended up happening was that $5 a foot and a lifetime easement, after a bunch of landowners got together from New York and Pennsylvania and got lawyers in New York and Pennsylvania, they got an offer from the CEO of the company for $115 a foot on a 40-year easement. That's a little different from $5 a foot on a lifetime easement. So what Joe was trying to tell you, and I will tell you, is the first offer is a joke. $3 an acre, you guys fell for that one here. So did a lot of people in Pennsylvania for the gas drill, and then it went to $5 and 10 and then 15 and then 25. You see what happens. The longer you wait, the more pressure you get on you, but the money goes up exponentially. It's your property. Do with what you want, but I will tell you right now that their job is to come in and get this done at the lowest price they can. Here's the other insult. My family agreed after a negotiation because majority owners of the property wanted to. We got paid money, and then they told us what they were going to do. I don't recognize the agreement as to what they offered for us. There's the agreement right there. That's pipeline easement from Laser Midstream. There's some interesting things when you look through it, like protection. You're seeing some pictures up there, and in a few minutes I'm going to float through the pictures. But I'm curious, when I read through this and you read paragraphs on it, erosion. They talk about the protections they were supposed to put in place when they put this across my property, none of which were done. And by the way, I called the DEP 4 times, and they went up and said, there's no problem. When the fish and boat kit was called and went up there, they gave them 48 hours to correct the erosion and settlement problems, or they're going to shut the entire pipeline down, all the workers along the pipeline. So don't expect the DEC to protect you, but maybe you've got another agency that can do it. But when I read through this, they basically violated all the protection and damages clauses, or most of them, in this document here. So whether you're talking gas lease or pipeline easement, they will not follow anything in this. They'll do exactly what they want to do. And then what do you have to do? You have to go get an attorney if you can afford one and try to go up against somebody that has millions and millions of dollars in their pocket. I don't recommend it unless you like to spend a lot of money and potentially lose. The main focus was, once we allowed them to do this, remember this is like late 2010, early 2011, I had not yet formed a real solid position on the gas drilling itself or the pipeline installation, so I was fairly what they call malleable, like I was a little bit more flexible then. If you haven't read the Constitution of the State of Pennsylvania, it's a very interesting document. It's very short on the Article 1, Section 27, natural resources of the public estate. The people have a right to clean air, pure water, and the preservation of the natural, scenic, historic, and aesthetic values of the environment. Pennsylvania's public natural resources are the common property of all the people, including generations yet to come. As trustee of these resources, the Commonwealth shall conserve and maintain them for the benefit of all the people. That was written in May 18th of 1971. That wasn't written yesterday. So when I read that, when you cover future generations, how does the unborn child in your daughter or son, or they're coming out of your daughter, get protected unless you do the protection? Because they can't go to court if you ruin something that they were promised to have kept for them. So I told you I'm the constitutional guy. I even have the New York Constitution here. It's a pretty big document and convoluted, but you will find some protections in there too for you guys. And then when you talk to the lawyers, they say, well, precedent has said that precedent can override a constitutional amendment. I don't buy that for 1 minute. So you need to stand up for your rights regardless of which side you're on any issue. But the rights are the same for everybody, individual rights. Joe covered the where this is going, but I'll take this out. If you want to Google it, it's very easy to find. List of pipeline accidents in the United States. That starts from 1890 and goes till 2000. The next one you can Google is list of pipeline accidents in the United States in the 21st century. It covers 2000 to 2012, now to 2013. Hundreds of documented from all over the country, explosions, spills, fires, you name it. I mean, if I'm going to have them put something across my property, I'm going to start looking it up and see what they're doing and what kind of a track record the industry in general has. It's pretty poor. Joe showed you the San Bruno. I was born in Woodland, California, not too far from San Bruno. Grew up in California, spent the first 46 years of my life there. And I was shocked to find that much evidence of problems, because these guys that come and talk to you, or when you go to a meeting, they will tell you about the sunshine and rainbows and pots of gold at the end of the rainbow. They don't go, and Joe covered it, but I will tell you, I was most interested in the compressor stations and wonder why they were popping up. We have 24 going in Susquehanna County alone. There's about 8 of them right now built. And they tell us, all the meetings and the hearings said, oh, it's just like, you won't even notice we're there. You're like, well, there's 12 engines running in a building. Now, they used to build them about 2 feet thick, and they had a big sound wall, so when you closed the door, you couldn't hear them. That lasted till one of them blew up, and it was like a giant grenade sending chunks of cement, a quarter mile away. So they have to build them out of sheet metal. They'll double it up for insulation. But you may have heard about the compressor station explosion we had at the Lathrop station down in Pennsylvania. That was last March. It lit on fire and exploded and blew one of the side of the building. The walls spread out. The roof was on fire. It only burned for a few hours, nothing to worry about. They, 11 o'clock in the morning, they evacuated the whole area. Our air raid siren went on in Montrose, and that brought 7 crews in, the volunteer firefighters. They cordoned off the area. The state police evacuated people that were within about a quarter mile of the burning building, looking for a secondary explosion. A little problem, not one of the first responders that came had the foam to put out a gas fire, not one. So you've already got like half a dozen of these built in the county. We don't even have a way to put them out. So that was one thing that was interesting. The other one was Nobody took responsibility for what happens after the explosion and fire because we're called, remember this, Class 1 rural. You guys are Class 1 rural area. Now, there's Class 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 is like in the middle of a city, 1 is like here, and you've got graded. They do it by how many structures are within 220 yards on each side of the line every square mile or every linear mile. So it's a calculation you can look up yourself. Here's the problem with that. This thing blows up, it rattles dishes and knocks things off walls, and chandeliers are swinging for a quarter mile or more in all directions. And they called it, Williams, who had just bought the station from Cabot 6 months earlier, called it a flash fire. Anybody here ever heard of a flash fire knocking dishes off of, off the shelves? Not me. That's called an explosion. And by the way, that's what every first responder and all the people that are in the document I have, there's the Susquehanna County Hazardous Materials Emergency Response Plan that was done in 2012. The earlier one, every 5 years they redo this. So you got 2005, this is 2012. And boy, they're not very nice talking about the what's going on with the industry in here. And by the way, this is a legal document that is every 5 years they have to file it with the feds. I didn't get the slide on this, but there's a compressor station. The roof melted off, the sidewalls melted out, and the interior all burned up. And so I find it interesting, not only that one happened, but a few months later you had one over in Windsor. During a lightning storm, they released gas. They did a raw gas release. And when the lightning hit the gas, it put a fireball about 1,000 feet in the air. And you had about 6 of your responder crews from that area show up because they didn't know what happened, but everybody was calling 911. It's kind of weird when something blows up, people start dialing 911. Like, what happened? And nobody knows until they get over there. But I found it interesting that just a few months ago, beginning of the year, probably March again, about a year after the other one, we had another explosion and compressor station fire also owned by Williams. That was in Brooklyn Township. Difference was, that was 11 o'clock at night. So let's go back a year before that. Got 11 o'clock in the morning, broad daylight, big explosion, fire, air raid siren goes off, first responders show up with all their sirens on, evacuate everybody within a quarter mile of the building, mandatorily told them, get out of your house, state police. Now we're this past March, and one blows up and lights on fire. That's called the Central HP station. And at 11 o'clock at night, no air raid siren. All the first responding vehicles came with no siren on, lights only. They evacuated nobody. They still cordoned off the area, quarter mile in all direction. Wouldn't let anybody in. What does that mean? What were they doing? They didn't want anybody to see. No cameras, no film crews, nothing could come in. They didn't even notify the very pro-drilling neighbors, the Puzos and the other family right near the station. They never woke them up 11 o'clock at night. You can look it up. They're quoted in the paper saying, really weird. It happened in the middle of the night. They didn't give us a chance to determine if we wanted to get out or not and go to safety. They never knocked on the door. We didn't know what was happening. They're asleep. Come on, guys. I mean, if you're going to allow this stuff into a neighborhood, let's at least have a set of ground rules. When the thing blows up and lights on fire, let's treat it the same as we did the year before. I asked, why no sirens, the first responders? And a full disclosure, my dad was in the Civil Air Patrol for 63 years. He was an emergency management specialist. I asked him when I was young, what does a first responder mean? He said, well, first responders run at things that 99.9% of the population are running away from, usually screaming. And I said, oh, now I understand. So you go at things where everybody else, it's dangerous, so they're running away. So when you have dangerous things, and this document's pretty easy to look up, but I found it interesting that they have environmental hazards, they have everything covered, including pipelines and things that can happen. They even mentioned what I was just talking about. Let's see here. In March of 2012, an explosion at a natural gas compressor station in Susquehanna County sent black smoke into the air, thus frightening residents who witnessed the event. The Springville Township explosion was caused by a small gas leak in the compressor station that pressurized the gas extracted from the ground. The explosion blew a hole in the roof of the building and rattled homes within a half-a-mile radius. That's not me saying that, guys. That's not a news account. That's the first responder account. If you look it up, and go ahead and Google it, and look what Williams called it, a flash fire. And guess who investigated the next day? Nobody. Not PIMSA, not nobody. Not FERC, not the county, not the state. They have no jurisdiction. You know who got to fire that thing right back up? Williams, because the company that put it in is in charge of it. I don't know about you, but I get a little scared when the company that made it blow up. By the way, Cabot owned it for a year and a half and never had one incident. Williams owned it for 6 months and it blew up. Something's wrong there. Then they blew up the one a few months later in Windsor. Then the one blew up in Brooklyn Township. And then another one blew up. And then the one in New Jersey blew up. In five incidents in 15 months. That would be one every 90 days.
They can't control lightning.
They told it. Well, I don't know if I would release. We're going to do question and answer after, but I'll answer that question. I don't think you should release methane into the air when you have a lightning storm. You're going to have a problem. There is some source of ignition there, so I would highly recommend against it if I was them. But I'm not the company, so obviously lightning only caused 1 out of 5, so they can only blame that on 1. Here's the Constitution pipeline. Now that's a little different, but it's also a FERC filing. They're telling us this gas is going to go to New York and to Boston. But Joe told you something, and I'll look at their own documents. This is from the filing meeting that I went to. The opportunities to serve power generation, industrial petrochemical, LDCs, and LNG exports. It's right there on their paperwork. They told us this is not exported gas. This is going to be used in the United States, used locally. But their own documents don't tell us that. So when you're talking to these companies, make them answer direct questions. That's the key. I'll cover a couple of other things here. If you're a denier, there's climate change deniers, there's also deniers of this is going elsewhere. Go to FERC.gov and look at their LNG import-export terminals. There's 33 in North America right there in process. 3 have already been approved. 22 are in the United States itself. Those are little circles all over, mostly down in the south. Where's it going, guys? They're not importing it. Because we have so much here, the price is driven so low, nobody could afford to bring in higher price gas from elsewhere and ship it across. It's outbound. So when they tell you it's America's fuel, ask them why is it all going to China, India, Russia, Japan, and Norway, and they're willing to pay high dollars for it, and they'll tell you, well, that'll be good for us, the trade balance. Come on. If it's our low price fuel and we're putting our necks on the line and our property on the line and the environment on the line, let's at least keep it here. Don't let anybody ever tell you when they do pipeline installation that nothing bad can happen to anybody. That's the picture of my neighbor's car, John Jones. That's a 40-ton mud truck flipped over on top of it. July 29th of 2011, when they were installing the laser pipeline behind my house, which is not my 115-acre rectangular property up the road, they were attempting to bore from my neighbor's property up high underneath Laurel Lake Creek and then back up to the neighbor next to them's property. And guess what? During the process on July 29th, the pressure built up underneath the creek, and they blew a 10-foot diameter hole out of my creek that flows in my backyard, which is a trout stream. It was crystal clear the morning of. My kids come and they like to throw breadcrumbs in so the fish can get it like piranha. And we went into town, came back about 2 in the afternoon. They ran out to throw some more breadcrumbs, and they came back to me and said, "Daddy, the creek's all full of mud." So we were like, So we went down the road, walked down the road, and asked the people. Boy, there was trucks driving around, and these guys were scrambling around. What happened? We had a blowout. What? Don't worry, we'll take care of it. First they told us this was never going to happen, but of course, then it happens. I went and called the DEP and said that, hey, they had a blowout in the creek behind me, and the lady had to correct me. Mr. Stevens, we don't call it a blowout, we call it an inadvertent return to surface. I said, I'm going to go down the street and have an involuntary muscle reaction unless somebody gets down here and fixes this thing. You know, that we were told we couldn't stand on the road and even look at it. You can't film it. This is the company installing it, telling me, a taxpayer, I can't stand on the road that my tax dollars pay for, that my house sits on, and look at what they're doing after they blew a hole in the creek and shot mud down into my creek right behind my house. All of a sudden, you can't stand on the roads in your own township. Thanks for playing, we told them. No, we'll stand wherever the hell we want, where my taxes pay for me to be able to stand and drive. They scurried around. One of the trucks that had sucked up the mud, these are big giant vacuum trucks. They usually do water, but they'll do mud too. They were driving in convoys over to dump the mud, and they were doing a big circle coming back up to get the mud, more mud that was just flowing out like a geyser. And one of them didn't put their brakes on at the bottom of Laurel Lake Road at 29 when they made the right. The guy in front of him did, but this guy didn't. He lost control of the vehicle and flipped it over. As you'll see, half the vehicle where John Jones was sitting in was crushed, right? He was crushed right into the vehicle. He lived for about 5 minutes after it, so his 17-year-old daughter that was sitting in the passenger seat could watch him die. So don't ever tell me you can't have a problem with just even the construction going on, because it can. This has happened many times all over the country, but that's just one that happened down the street. By the way, the driver had no CDL. And 3 faulty brakes on the truck, 2 caged in the rear, 1 wasn't working on the front. He was taken to the hospital and then left the state after he was released back to Texas. Nobody's ever done it. Nobody's ever stood anything for this. Of course, the family sued. That doesn't get your dad back and your husband back. So I'm telling you these things because the reality is not the same as what they tell you when they're courting you, because it's a courting process. That's what they do. They're courting you. While they were installing the pipeline on my property, I have 2,400 feet. 1,200 was bored underneath the wetlands. 1,200 was ditched, so I got both processes. One day my forester calls me when they're up on my property, and I didn't finish, but you know how many times they blew the creek out in the backyard before they finished? 8 times in a row. After 5 times, they stopped and dammed the creek and diverted it, dried it completely, and then just let the mud flow and sucked it up as it was coming out. Yeah, it's going to come out anyway. Let's just get this thing done, and we'll cover it all up. So they get up on my property. My forester calls me all upset, because while he was up there working, they didn't see him, but he saw them. They drove about 20 of the 5,000-gallon super sucker trucks, they call them, the big trucks, and they dumped what we call liquid of unknown origin. It has all this gel in it. It's the stuff they use to bore the pipeline. By the way, they weren't doing that boring on my property at the time. They just used my property outside of the right-of-way that we signed and gave them as a dumping ground for up to 100,000 gallons of this goop, and you can look at it later. So I called the DEP. They went up there 4 times to look, and they said, oh, we didn't see anything. That's not what the EPA said, and that's not what the Fish and Boat said when they went up there. This gel was all over. It looked like millions of ice cubes. That's what they use. It's called Max Gel to thicken up the soup. So my focus tonight is your landowners. If they want to do this on your property, number one, it's FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Look them up. They've given about 4,000 applications in the last 30 years, and only once have they not given eminent domain. Anybody here know what eminent domain is? Yeah, you do. Once they say yes, you're a Class 1 rural, there is 0 setback. Like this old church building, they can bore this 30-inch pipeline right underneath the foundation of your house, right underneath your kid's school, whatever the best straight line is. They don't have to go around anything. And anybody want to challenge me, come to the scoping hearing if they ever have one for here, because I went to all of them for the Constitution. There is no setback. There is no oversight besides the company that builds it, because it's Class 1 rural. And you get, I'll use the Constitution as an example. Anybody wants to argue with me can. They set aside $750,000 on their documents to give 122 miles of landowners. If you divide that into feet, it's $3 a foot. And when FERC tells them they can pay $3 a foot, that's what they get to pay. Now, they'll pay you for your trees. Anybody here have woods on their property? I have 100 acres on my 115 acre. 15 is cleared. You want to know what the value of my timber is on my property? Nothing. It's firewood. Don't care what kind it is now. The Constitution will be 125-foot minimum right-of-way cut through 122 miles of Pennsylvania and New York, just like here. They'll cut the trees down. They'll pay the landowner for it. Most of the places where they're putting pipelines and where I am, you can go see the piles of wood just laying there. They're not touching it, just sits there and rots. You know why? Because every wood processing plant by us, Diaz, all the lumber and timber places are full to the brim. They're stacking wood everywhere. What does that do, guys? I mean, let's talk about this. Even if you're pro this coming here and you got leases and you want to get gas, they took the price of natural gas from $14 a thousand 5 years ago down to $2 last year, 7 times decrease. Now it's come up a little bit to about $3.50 now. It hovers around there. That's the value of your minerals underneath your private property. Who did it? I didn't do it. None of you in this room did it. The industry. You overproduce, you're going to drive the price down. It's trapped in America. Remember that. Who here knows what the Henry Hub price is? When you have a commodity that can't be trucked and it's stuck in America, your price drops when you overproduce. That's the problem we have right now. We have a giant glut. The industry knows it. That's why they're trying so hard to export it. I'm wondering why they need this. It takes 2 major pipelines going east and west and connects them. Anybody see that? National Geographic. March of this year. Giant flame on the front. Know what that is? North Dakota. The estimate right now at today's price is $100 to $200 million a month of natural gas being lit on fire because they want the oil underneath it. So you're going to cut my trees down and they're going to lay there and rot. You're going to drive the price of my natural gas down underneath my private property to nothing. We get paid at the wellhead, guys, so there's another fun one. But you know the funny thing is they pay you, the owners at the wellhead, a certain percentage, 12.5, 15, 20, whatever negotiation you did. But as soon as it leaves that wellhead price that we get paid on as landowners, it starts doubling and tripling all the way down that pipeline. The pipeline people get more money for transport. Then if you get it to liquefaction, it goes up to $16 a thousand liquefied. So they're making a ton of money there. But the landowner gets nothing. You get nothing once they put this pipeline across your property. You get your payment and any damage. When I was negotiating with Laser and we weren't agreeing, I went in one day to the office just to have fun with them and I said, my family and I have decided we'll sign, but we don't want any money up front. They said, what? Yeah, no money. When you put it in, we want a valve on our side of the property on both sides. You owe me 0.1% of the dollar value of every bit of gas that goes through that pipeline. I'll take it. The guy, he laughed at me and he said, you'd be making more than the CEO. And I said, gee, really? I wonder. So they're going to put billions of dollars worth of gas through these things like the Constitution and this one here, and the landowner will get paid pennies if FERC is involved, and they'll pay you for your trees they cut down and let rot somewhere and didn't even use. Be like if we have any hunters in the room, just blast on anything that moves and leave it laying there. You don't process the meat, you don't do the fur, you don't take nothing off of it, you just leave it laying there because you just wanted to watch it die. I don't know anybody around here that really does that. But that's really what we're looking at. North Dakota is kind of interesting. They want the oil. 30,000 oil wells in North Dakota. There's the map. Well, why aren't they capturing the gas? If it's this commodity that we can all get rich on. Hey, there it is from space. I Googled that. That looks like North Dakota's on fire. That's thousands and thousands of oil wells where they're burning the gas off. It takes months to burn all the gas off of a well before they can go down and get the oil. And so I found that quite interesting. But my focus was I asked the question that you all are thinking, why aren't they just capturing it? Do you know how many people will invest in a dry natural gas pipeline into North Dakota to drive it anywhere? 0. Well, why do you say that? Well, the pipeline across my property was supposed to cost $65 million to put in, but because they had to, go around the wetlands and do all those things, and they had to bore, that costs $100 a foot to ditch and $300 to $500 a foot to bore. The price went way up. $150 million was the final price tag to finish the laser line. And then they turned around after 3 days of operation and they sold it to Williams for how much? $750 million. Now they couldn't pay the landowners more than $5 a foot because, this is too expensive to put in. Really? So when you resold it for $750 million, how much did the landowners get on that deal? 0. Somebody's not telling us the truth here, guys. And Williams wouldn't have paid $750 million for a 33-mile pipeline unless they were making a lot more than that. So we're at the short end of the stick if you haven't figured that out. The XL pipeline's the same thing. They're going to carry that oil, it looks like, straight down to Houston, Texas, and export it. So My focus tonight is to say you have power. You are United States citizens living in the freest and greatest country on this planet. That's my belief. My brother spent 28 years as a career military lieutenant colonel, hurricane hunter. My father spent 63 years in the U.S. Air Force Auxiliary as a Civil Air Patrol and emergency management expert. So I was raised around people who made me say, "Sir," when I talk to people, and hold your hand over your heart when the national anthem was being played. But I certainly know my brother did put his life on the line for this country. Neither did my father or anybody in this room that did service in the military, so that you could have your property stolen from you by the country that you went and fought for, pay you pennies, cut down your trees, and then let some corporation make billions of dollars passing gas, which is what I call it, passing gas. Usually get in trouble for doing that, but these guys paid a lot of money for passing gas through your property that you had no choice to put it on there, and you get next to nothing for it. If you're happy with that, you know, I got some swampland in Florida that I might be able to sell you, but let me tell you that if you think the DEC is going to help you, because I hear it all the time, we're writing the best lease there is, you know, for gas. We're writing the best rules for them doing this right of way, which we did. We had lawyers put this together. It took 6 months, and they broke every rule on erosion and sediment control. DEP did nothing, even after the dumping, but Fish and Boat did something. They went up there. They gave them 48 hours to correct what they'd done with all the erosion and settlement that was just running into my creeks. My creeks ran muddy for, 8 months up there. It was ridiculous. They filed 5 criminal complaints and fined them $20,000. And I called them and said, "Why did you file a criminal complaint?" They said, we get paid a lot faster that way. I'm going to show you, because pictures are worth 1,000 words. There's the pipeline up on my neighbor's property that was bored across to go in. There's the creek. That's when it was a 60-foot diameter blowout, not a 10-foot. Look at the sewer pipes they used to try to divert the water. There's the gel. What is this stuff? I go up there, and this is all over my property. That stuff is not supposed to be anywhere near the environment. That sucks up all the stuff they use in the drilling mud. Look at that. See that? That's a straining bunker. We found those, about 6 of them, all along the route that we've seen so far. See that up the hay bales? They put straining material in there, and then they would pull the truck up, and they'd dump the liquid in there, and it would strain out those gel balls. As soon as we found it and I reported it, they went up and tore it out. And we found one over in Great Bend, and we're finding them all along the route. They look at the rural areas, and they use it as a trash dump. You can't believe the amount of trash they had up there. I met with the head of Laser, Tom Karam. He's a real big lawyer. He used to be the CEO of Southern Pacific Railroad. And I demanded that he send guys up and clean up the mess. They threw like McDonald's stuff and everything else. There's the trucks for the boring. There's the kind of truck that flipped over on my neighbor John Jones. There's the boring operation. They did one way, and then they turned around and went the other way. There's the machine right there. It was a giant mess. They said my property was the nightmare of the entire 33-mile line, not because of anything we did, but when they set up, we had the big rainstorms. They were sinking trucks into the axles on the property. It was amazing. My 3-wheeler. They promised me a road. That's all I wanted. Put me a road so I can traverse my property. It was very thick woods. Nice for my 3-wheeler and my vehicles. They didn't even get that right. There's the stream in my backyard. Does that look nice and clean like it did when it was a trout stream? No. It still has mud in the bottom. And when I said to the Fish and Boat, hey, thanks for finding them and filing criminal complaint, because they said we get paid a lot faster when we file criminal charges, I said, when are they going to come and clean up my creek and clean up my property where they dumped it? They said, oh, no, we've already made a settlement agreement with the company, so you're on your own. Get a lawyer. They allow them to come and do this on your property. They totally do this. Look at that. These are the kind sandbags around that giant hole there is where they blew the hole out at the bottom of the creek. They had to divert it around it. I know, though, I'm a liar.
Does this happen to everybody, Craig?
What's that?
Does this sort of thing happen to all
It
landowners?
happened very quick. Look up blowouts in Susquehanna County alone.
I asked the question, does this happen to all landowners?
Oh, not every landowner.
I'm asking a
Yep.
legitimate question.
Please be quiet.
So we've got question and answer now, so don't worry about that. But I'm going to finish by saying that I'm reading a lot of people that I think came before me that are a lot smarter than me. Gandhi said, "Earth provides enough for every man's need, but not every man's greed." So if you're in this for the money, you also have to remember that somebody after you has to survive on this. And I'll end it with this. Martin Luther King, on some positions, cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politic? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right? So I'm just going to let you know, as far as I'm concerned, if they have to force this on all of us, something's wrong with it. If we all decide that it's a good thing, that's one thing. But if one person along the route of this line doesn't want it across their property and they're forced to have it, they're breaking a rule that we should all be having to follow. Thank you very much, and we'll have a question and answer session.